Hello everybody, welcome to Winning the Away Game. If you love business and the Springbok rugby, then this is the show for you. I'm Justinus Adriaanse, I'm the co-founder of Pride Property and We Think Code in South Africa and Interbenny Sisters and Ngundi Holdings in Canada. I love traveling to watch the Springboks and I eat Nando's in every single country they exist. My co-host Flip van der Merwe is a Blue Bulls legend, Springbok number 818, and he earned 38 caps in the lock position. Then he took the leap, moved to France to play rugby at Clermont. And as he says, in sport, retirement chooses you. So the final whistle blew at 34 years of age. He restarted a career in data, consulting and strategy, earning his executive MBA at Cambridge. Today, he is managing partner of Level 6 Consulting, where he helps leaders post-growth service companies get their heads out of the scrum, find the gap, and charge onwards. Flip, how are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you, Justinus. We've got some legends on the pod today, and looking forward to our discussion.
Well, speaking of our amazing guests, let's not keep them waiting any longer. Today, we're grateful to welcome two incredible guests. Flip, who did you bring to the show today?
Yeah, my guest today is one of South Africa's most decorated athletes, World Cup winner, a record breaker, and recently considered to be South Africa's most successful post-rugby Springbok. And I'm happy to call him a good friend as well. His journey started in 1995, watching the Rugby World Cup with his dad. And that moment didn't just ignite the love for sport. It planted the belief that rugby could unite a country divided by history. After playing for the Lions, Bulls, Stormers, and earning 124 caps as a Springbok, Bryan made the leap to Europe, signing with Toulon, and we all know the history that he made with Toulon. But like every bold move, the shift came with cost, injury, uncertainty, and the quiet question every athlete faces. Who am I when the game ends? He retired from rugby in 2018, and now his journey has come full circle, from global success to South African soil. He's building businesses, mentoring leaders, and redefining what it means to win, long after the final whistle. Welcome, husband, father, entrepreneur, president, all the accolades. Bryan Habana, once the fastest man on the field and now learning to start again. How are you?
Hello, Flip. Once the fastest man. Sure, have I gone downhill that quickly, right? Did you say once the fastest man? But yeah, thanks for that lovely introduction. Great to be on the pod. Thank you for even stirring up some emotions as you read it. I think when you retire, you hear a lot about your thing, but about your history and the path you had, the chapters you had, but hearing from someone that you walk the path with, stirs up a certain amount of emotion. So looking forward to chatting all things rugby transition, the current chapter that I'm in, and hopefully share some, I want to say good banter, Flip, because we had a few good times, which we'll definitely be hopefully addressing at some point over the next couple of hours.
100%. Justinus, who do you have for us?
I have an absolute legend. He's been called the dream manager in disguise. He's built a tech company that doesn't always feel like it's just a tech company. It feels more like a movement. One that stretches from Johannesburg all the way to New York City in the USA. He attended 8 different schools and got expelled from quite a few of them, but it didn't stop him from bootstrapping his business into a global MSP. His business has survived multiple crises, and he used each one to reinvent a business model. Along the way, he's made sure every employee had a chance to chase their own dreams. But what happened between expulsion and expansion? What challenges did he face and what did he learn? And which rugby team does he support in the Rugby Championship? Welcome, Orrin Klopper, CEO of NetSurIT.
Thanks so much, Justinus.
So, first question, gentlemen. Tell us your favorite Springbok story. Orrin, you want to lead us in?
Sure. Yeah, there are so many. Probably the thing that stands out right now for me is just some of the stories behind the way Rassie is leading the Springbok and managing the Springbok team. And specifically, there's a great book by Liz Weissman and Greg McKeown called Multipliers. And in the book, he talks about this idea of you have leaders and managers that multiply your talent, and then you have others that really diminish your talent. And, just watching Chasing the Sun and just seeing some of the ways in which he's got these really, like take Amani Leboeck as an example, and where he really made some huge mistakes in the game, and Rassi's and the team's approach was, we're behind you 100%. And that's a typical example of multiplying the talent within someone, whereas you can come down on them like a ton of bricks and diminish them. They lose their self-belief, and the rest self-perpetuates. So maybe not a specific memory, but just a parallel with a leadership quality that you see, and that I think is part of the success of the Springboks today.
Bryan?
I don't know whether I'm nervous here, right? As a backline player, you almost have to wait for the forwards to finish before you start talking. Otherwise, they bite your head off. So I was like, do I start? Do I jump in? So there's two sort of real standouts. Obviously, Flip mentioned in the intro, 24th of June, 1995, being at Ellis Park, getting to witness history being made, and think having a passion ignited within you. It really became a watershed moment in my life, because it sort of gave me the sense of belief of wanting to do something bigger. It gave me this opportunity to understand the power of sport, and gave me the sense of belonging in a infancy of our democracy in South Africa, where an incredible icon like Nelson Mandela stood firm in a belief in a specific symbol called the Springbok emblem, which has become such an ingrained part of our society in South Africa, and understood the power that has, where maybe at that point in 95, the Springbok didn't appeal to 80% of our country. It got seen as a sign of oppression. Yet Nelson saw, and his incredible entrepreneurial vision, of which he saw that power behind sport play out, ignited the dream in a 13-year-old boy. The dream didn't start out quite how I'd hoped. First ever game of rugby the following year at King Edward VII School was for the under-14 G side. And we've got a lot of clever brains on this current podcast, but just for those out there, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. The seventh best little scrum off, which when he wore shoulder pads, you couldn't see his neck, was absolutely hilarious. But just not getting to play this game, given what had transpired a year before, was beautiful. Fast forward 8 years, 20th of November 2004, getting to make my debut for the Springboks. And I know Flip said it quite a bit as well, but after all the sacrifice, the effort from your parents, getting to the point of the realization of a dream was incredible. But I tell people that was by far the best moment of my career, because it was at that point where, through the journey to get to that point, you appreciated all of it, but it then made you realize how much more you want to stay in that position, and that whatever transpired the ages before that meant absolutely nothing, because the hard work only started then. So those two sort of key milestone dates were incredibly important in the person that I become. Rugby, and I tell people, rugby has given me a phenomenal life, and there's a lot of negative that sometimes come with it, but in comparison to the positive, the life it's given me, 20th of November 2004 was an incredibly special day.
It's amazing, if you think when you start off 99, whenever you standard 6 or grade 8, 99.
96, 95, 96. You see the forwards, that's it. You just have to help them a little bit, right? You tell them go forward, they go forward. But you just need to give them some form of direction. 95, 96. And again, for someone that did an MBA at Cambridge, Mr. Van der Merwe, we might need to work on those accounting skills just a little bit.
Yeah. It's okay. I've got Excel doing the sums for me. That's all right. And when you start playing rugby at grade 8, you never think you want to become a Springbok. Everyone wants to become a Springbok. You never think it's actually possible. When when I grew up, there were legends. We used to watch Cobus Vista and Mark Andrews, and I even used to watch good friend Victor Matfield play, and be amazed. And you never can think that you can represent these guys one day. You guys with Orrin got a common denominator in King Edward School. How did your journey in King Edward shape you? Towards becoming the person you are today?
We get A before beauty on this one because I'm going to let Orrin speak first.
Thanks, Bryan. So it's hard to explain the impact the school had on my life. I'd been to a lot of schools, and I'd been expelled or asked to leave 3. And then I ended up at King Edward's in Standard 7, which I suppose is grade 9 now. I joined in the second term. And, my mom, to be really open, my mom was in her third marriage, and he was not, I didn't want to be around this guy. So the idea of being at boarding school at Cares was for me very, very favorable. And it really was something that I think just having that constant environment with the discipline, we had a thing like you would have to work after dinner. I was at Buxton House. And there was still corporal punishment at that time. So, I was an unbelievably naughty kid. And, some of the, so at hostel, if you misbehaved, you had a choice. You could go and do what was called gardening on Saturday morning with Mr. Moffat, or you could get whipped by the prefects with a sawn-off hockey stick, which that was my choice because I'd received a lot of hidings in my life. And there was just a dynamic at that school where it almost didn't care where you came from, whether you were a poor Portuguese kid from Yeovil or whether you were a more affluent kid from Houghton. I was nothing at that school, but I felt like part of a brotherhood and part of a community. I didn't really succeed in sport. I did pretty well in academics, but I worked my ass off. Nothing came easily. So, I feel in those early years where my life was so tumultuous, I was such a problem child, and I could have gone in so many directions. That school just gave me this sort of grounding and this foundation upon which I've been able to become, I'm proud of the journey I've traveled, and I really think King Edward's has played a big part of that. And I don't say that meaning King Edward's is perfect, and there are all sorts of things you could list that it didn't get right and so forth and that, but I feel deeply connected, and I'm still involved in the school, and I find it a huge privilege and honor to give back.
Unlike Orrin, I was a boarder in a day boy's body, with the benefits of sleeping in my own bed and not getting tracked or have gardening on a Saturday morning. Although a lot of the boarders always ate all my lunch boxes, so much so that in grade 11 and 12, my mother actually had to pack me 2 lunch boxes. But it's only because I love the boarders so much. And to Orrin's point, a real brotherhood. And it's weird looking back because maybe just to your point, right, around when you start off playing the game and rugby post 95, it obviously catapulted, where South Africa was in the global map. The stat is that if you play schoolboy level rugby in your final year of school, the chance of becoming a Springbok rugby player in the next decade is 0.00058%. If you think ever since 1896, post this rugby championship, there's maybe only ever been 955 players who have represented South Africa, of which maybe 15 or so actually didn't represent. They toured with the Springbok, but never actually played a test match. So when I started playing in 1996 in that under 14 G side, yes, there was a dream, but it was the most far-fetched dream ever. But maybe to Orrin's point around I think having the educational foundation of being involved in something greater than yourself. And I think we were very fortunate in Cares, the discipline, the structure. Mr. Moffat, our geography teacher, was an absolute brute. May his soul rest in peace. But as hard and as disciplinarian as they were, there was a softer element to it. Aaron, I'm not quite sure how much Miss Nelson got laid into you, but Latin was not my favorite and was the first subject I dropped when I had the choice. Because between Miss Nelson and Mr. Wilson, I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. But I think what Cares gave us in terms of the fundamentals to have pride in yourself, understand the pride with which you're representing something bigger than yourself. And I don't know if I was a nothing. I played first team rugby, went to Craven Week, but I wasn't prefect. And like I look back now, and there were times where the things that actually built my character at Cares, to Orrin's point, were also not the best thing. I got dropped from the under 16 A side for one game because I went to go play for the Lions. And the then coach, with two old boys who were our coaches, assistant coaches, felt that I was putting the Lions ahead of the school. And I told my dad, I started swearing when that decision. If you chose to play for the Lions, that means next week in the last game of the season, you're not going to play for the under 16As. And I was just so bitter. And then I learned a valuable lesson that the school didn't teach me. Like my dad said, listen, you're going to go play for the under 16C team against Red Hill, who's like in the C, D leagues, not even, and then once you finish with that game, you're going to go back to the school and support your A-team rugby teammates. Yes, and I will never forget how seething I was with my dad. I would like rather let Mr. Moffat jack me because I do not want to go support this team. And therein lies a point that I learned about. You also can't let people steal your joy because there's this expectation of, you can be successful, you can do all these things. But as a 16-year-old who couldn't really fathom why he was dropped, unfortunately, the school couldn't give me the necessary logical understanding of what to do better. And it wasn't that they were prioritizing the school over me. It was just that was their way of thinking. So the school was a really phenomenal upbringing for me. Again, was never a prefect. I couldn't understand how I wasn't. I wasn't an A student, Orrin, but I do know one thing I'm extremely proud of is that I am on the academics board at King Edward's. You get onto the academics board if you have a distinction in matric. I'm very proud to say that my only distinction in matric, putting me on the academic board, which doesn't, very much like a golf scorecard, has a comment section, is Bryan Habana for his distinction in second language Afrikaans, of which I'm extremely proud. But there's no comment column on the academic board, but I'm on the academic board. But yeah, it was a great environment of camaraderie. I think, Orrin, I'm not quite sure from a sporting perspective, playing in that red jersey was incredibly special. School rivalry at its best is this phenomenal environment. And, having Joe Fanico 2 years ahead of me, who was probably one of the best schoolboy rugby players South Africa's ever seen, it just was, I had Graham Smith a year ahead of me, and just seeing that aura around the Reds, and you sleep with the jersey under your pillow for the very first time before you play. So there's that element of schoolboy rivalry that I think instills quite an incredible amount of foundational elements on which people can then springboard and then become incredible businessmen and have an impact in the sporting industry, art and culture. So very grateful for my 5 years and the sense of belonging that the school gave me.
Wow. I'm sure that distinction in Afrikaans served you well interacting with all the rugby players after school.
More importantly, it served me very well going to Rand Afrikaans University the following year, and where our 12 English Oaks got into Bastion Man's Kosheid. And we looked and we were like, wow, this is going to be interesting, James. This is going to be very interesting. But yeah, that did help me facilitate the chasm between the massive difference Afrikaans and English mindsets have. But yeah, it allowed me to marry my dream girl, who was across the way at Schoonveld at Rand Afrikaans Universiteit. So yeah, very grateful for that distinction, Justinus.
Amazing. Okay, so we want to talk a little bit about sort of the whole ground and the origin stories. Those King Edward obviously fills that in quite nicely. But Orrin, maybe from your side, just tell us a little bit about the origin of your business. You became obviously successful in South Africa, and then at some point you decided that you wanted to shift and run the business abroad. But just talk us up to that point where the business, some of the ups and downs, and up to the point where you're ready and you want to go to expand in the US.
Yeah, sure. So, I didn't get any distinctions, but I worked very, very hard. So I should have got some distinctions. I think I got a lot of B's and some C's. I think, I was in matric. I was so excited about the prospect of university because I thought it was going to be they really wanted to know how you thought. And it wasn't just about memorizing and then regurgitating. And then an opportunity came where my brother said I could come to the UK for a year. So I matriculated in 92 and I went to the UK in 1993. And in 1991, my brother Anton had paid for me to go to South America with him and his girlfriend. So that was my first overseas trip, and it was just this huge, huge eye-opener. And then in 93, I went and lived in the UK with my brother, working for him, selling. He had a business called Hunger Busters that sold hot dogs and hamburgers at rock concert, biker shows, and at that time, the Hells Angels were one. They had a security offering where they would offer the security for the show, and so needless to say, there were not a lot of security issues at the shows where the Hells Angels were the security, and so I definitely saw in my brother the way he ran his business, his work ethic, and it really had an impact on me. So when I got back, I wasn't actually planning to come back to South Africa. I went to Israel for 2 months and worked on a moshav there because both my brothers had done that, and it's one of the hardest I've ever worked in my life. And I wanted to go back to the UK, but it was not the most popular time to be a South African. They refused me leave to enter, so I went back to South Africa, and so I signed up at Rao University, and I only found out. Well, my mom had actually signed me up. I only found out when we were in the bookshop that there was no English track for Rao, at 94. It was Afrikaans, and I didn't do bad. I think I also worked very hard in Afrikaans. I think I got a D for Afrikaans. You wouldn't think so with a surname like Klopper, but so anyway, so I did commerciële reg, wanooreenstemming, sequestrasie, and all of these things in Afrikaans, so it was and then in that year I met a guy, his name's Rian van der Walt, who was doing engineering, and I met another guy called Bryan Cooper, who was also doing BCom. Bryan and I were the most handsome English-speaking guys in BCom. It was, self-proclaimed. And, so we would sit in BLS there with 400 students doing accounts. And then I started doing various things this was in 94. We pornography was legalized at that time in 94 in South Africa. There was a lot of change. So we took the top, the most awarded porn movie at the time, and I convinced my girlfriend at the time to buy a second VHS. She's like, why are we going to do that? So I was like, no, we can copy the movies we really like. She was quite well off. So we were just duplicating it. It was Janine Lindemulder's Hidden Obsessions. And we were duplicating them. And then I was working at restaurants, and I would sell them at the restaurant. You always got an ego pornography market at a restaurant with some of the kitchen staff, some of the guys. And then we threw open parties. And then I also sold seconded shoes. So there was Saucony, Nike, where you had slightly defected shoes. They were still good, so we used to sell that. I also worked at the Rosebank Rooftop Market selling books and magazines for my brother. And then Rian, invited me to, so in my second year, 95, Rio invited me to come and sell for them because I took information systems as an extra major. If you passed all your subjects at Rio, or you got above 60 or 65, you could do an extra subject free of charge. So I did information systems. And look, my impression of that first year of varsity was it was rubbish. They literally just wanted you to memorize stuff and regurgitate it. Whereas information systems, I was like, wow, they really want to know what you think. And I was not the best programmer. In those 7-hour exams, I took 7 hours. The really bright guys took 15 minutes. And then that's how the journey started. I started selling computers, engineering calculators under Rian, who'd opened that door for me. Bryan joined us shortly after that. And then the business started growing in South Africa. We came on the name NetSurIT in late 99, which was really this idea of technology, IT support, insurance, which was born out of the idea that small and medium enterprises were being exploited and taken advantage of with their technology, and there wasn't a trusted, reliable service provider that was looking after them. And we grew organically from there, and in 2004, we were invited to participate in Microsoft, what they call a partner advisory council. It was a strong partnership with Microsoft, and I would fly to Seattle 2-3 times a year. I would fly through New York, and I ended up building up some friends in New York, and the business continued to grow. And in 2015, another story over tequila, managed to convince a friend in New York that we should be their IT services company. Closed that deal at 8 Rand to the dollar. Within 6 months, it had gone to 12 Rand to the dollar. So we said, okay, what are we going to do with this? We want to grow it. So I started planning to move to New York. And in that process, we found an acquisition and we bought our first business. Made every mistake you could imagine except go out of business. We have most of the clients. We don't have a single one of the staff members left. And then just continue to grow organically and acquisitively, but that's how our journey to the US started. So now about 65% of our revenue is in the US, and about 35% of our revenue is in South Africa.
Wow.
Yeah, very good.
I don't sell any more porn though. That was just during an earlier stage of my life.
we have to wheel and deal whatever we have to do.
No, that was it.
Bryan, so our path obviously crossed at the Bulls, at the Box. Very turbulent times, 2010, 2011, when I had the fortune to join. For me, I was all starstruck. I couldn't believe I had the opportunity to play. And then when you reflect back, you just think about what chaos it was, and then moved on further. And when you moved to Toulon 2013, if I got it right, what triggered that movement? How did you go through making that decision?
Look, so actually, it wasn't this, oh, I'm going to now do this. I think post the 2007 World Cup, which I know we're pre-recording this podcast, but today is actually our 18-year anniversary of the 20th of October 2007, getting to celebrate what was a pretty epic journey post 95. But I think after 2007, I'd been approached by a few clubs in France. I was sort of thinking, do I want to? I sort of had this plan of being to be in South Africa at least till 2019. I really want to be playing my part in South African rugby at that stage. So I had a few discussions, and I'll never forget myself and Van Dullefied, 2007. My dad was acting as my agent, and he said, listen, Bayon not interested in acquiring your services with some really good money back then. I'm like, let's go have a look. And having never experienced the French environment for the very first time, we're like, listen, we got to keep this under wraps. I've just signed the Bulls contract, renewed my contract up until 2009. Got to keep everything under wraps. And like, no, they're going to promise everything under wraps. Got to France, and there was like this media forum waiting for me and Baynant, and I'm like, this is not going to go down well at all. And that was after sort of a pre-season that I decided to not go to in George in 2007. So there was maybe a little bit of animosity that happened. So that was sort of my first, and I was like, okay, guys, listen, and I've committed to the Bulls. And you lied that you weren't going to have media attention, and all the media attention was on me. And then 2009, I sort of had this opportunity at the end of that Bulls contract to sort of, the Bulls wanted to keep me, had opportunity to go to France, and the Stormers had come on the table as well. And I think having experienced the France with the Rugby World Cup, there was an immediate emotional connectivity. France is good. And then never forget going to meet Murad Boudjelal for the very first time in 2009. And there's one specific restaurant that he played all the players that he's wanting to get to Toulon to, right on the beachfront in June. Amazing summertime. Oh, it's immaculate. Get wined and dine. I was like, wow, I could do this. I really could do this. And then we spoke about the initial number and got back to South Africa 2 weeks later. And the initial number wasn't the number that came through on the contract. And I'm like, absolute fee to wine and dine me, but they're not actually come through. And I was like, no. And then the Stormers with Rusty Erasmus were also looking to sort of rebuild a franchise that had some incredible legacy in South Africa, and look particularly at myself and Jock Bree to up their ante in the 2010 season. And I think detrimentally for me, because of potential stuff happening off the field, it actually made it a lot easier for me to choose Cape Town than to rather stay at the Bulls, which, getting to reflect now, had a lot of emotional complexity that literally came to the fore off the field rather than on the field. And then I thought I had this incredible time for 3 years in Cape Town trip that was amazing. And the opportunity to get back into France with Toulon came around in 2012, which is gone. You guys got an end of your tour. I was injured, and then an agent there said, listen, but Toulon are really keen on it. You've had a great year, SRA Player of the Year. They're willing to put down a lot more money than they were talking about in 2009. I'm like, okay, sign me up, Scotty. So I met with Bernard Laporte in London in December 2012. And then flew back to South Africa and had to explain to my wife, who now dug her roots very deep in Cape Town, because I told her when we moved there in 2009 that Cape Town is our forever home. So I got back, I was like, Janine, listen, Toulon are willing to pay really good money. They're like, but no, whoa, you said Cape Town is our forever home. I'm like, it will still be our forever home. We're just going to experience Tel Aviv on the Côte d'Azur for like 3, maybe 4 years, right? Yes, so that was like a struggle to get over. But I think it was at a point in my career, Flip, where I was really fortunate enough to have achieved everything in South Africa. I'd won Super Rugby, I'd won Rugby Player of the Year, I'd won a Currie Cup, had the opportunity to play against the Lions, win a Tri Nations in 2009. And I knew that for longevity in a career, I needed to be testing myself at a specific level. And at the time of signing for Toulon, you had the likes of Johnny Wilkinson, Patrick Puerta, Ali Williams, Carl Heyman, Juan Fernandez Lobe, Drew Mitchell had just signed, Matthew Bastero. Like, it was just this plethora, the Armitage brothers. It was just a plethora of world-class caliber players that I knew I needed to be around if I really wanted to push to be involved in that 2015 Rugby World Cup. And as much as the financial element played a really big part in the decision going there, it really was trying to maintain a level to constantly push yourself further with the best in the business to bring out the best within you. And when South Africa had really become comfortable in the rugby environment because of what I've achieved, I really wanted to become uncomfortable to push myself forward for that 2015 Rugby World Cup.
That's fascinating. It's amazing how the willingness to push through or seek that uncomfortableness, seek that space outside of your comfort zone drives growth and opportunity. So, Orrin, when you decided it's time to go and start in New York, how uncomfortable was that?
Yeah, it was exciting. I definitely was not leaving South Africa for thinking that I was following opportunity. And, when I left, I yeah, it was crazy. I'd just gotten married in September. I'd gotten married in September 2014, and I ended up. My mom passed away in May of 2016, and then I went to live in New York from July 2016. So it was just a lot going on. We'd done quite a strategic acquisition in 2015 of a Microsoft professional services partner, which was a small acquisition, but it was very strategic. And yeah, I remember, hugely underestimating the impact it would have, and for various reasons, and some totally unrelated to the move, but a whole lot related to the move. My wife at the time, by September of 2016, had five miscarriages in the space of 22 months. She went into full-on psychosis, and and there are a lot of things that happened in a very, very, very short space of time. So my relationship imploded. I ended up like, my one partner, Ryan, had said, "Orrin, you're going to end up this." He wasn't sure if it was a good acquisition to do. He said, "You're going to end up selling. You're going to end up account managing. You're going to end up da 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 da." And he was 100% right. We made every mistake. It was good. I mean, those two shareholders we acquired from are still shareholders in the business today. They're amazing people, but we made a lot of mistakes. So I'm an optimist. Like, one of my superpowers is optimism and gratitude. So like, I can reframe like that. But yeah, just story for another day. That 2016 was probably one of the most intense years of change I've ever had in my life. And if you look at the journey from there until about 2019, 2020, we didn't make much progress, to be honest. We didn't go out of business, but we didn't make much progress. So I think that's a bit of a roundabout answer to your question.
Tell me more about 2016, man. What was the toughest part of it for you?
Sure. We'd spent more money than we've ever spent on anything on that acquisition. I was so in love with this woman, I cannot even explain to you. It was like, and when I love, it's like a force. And to see this person that inspired me and I loved so much in the midst of me living my entrepreneurial dreams, literally see her break after, you've never met anybody that want to be a mother as much as this woman did. And by that fifth miscarriage, she just broke. And I was filled with shame from the perspective that, I'd been married before. I wanted to spend the rest of my life with that woman. I wanted to spend the rest of my life with this woman. My mom had gone through my mom was married 4 times. I was filled with shame that I'd failed, and business was crazily doing well in the midst of me being quite absent. And to really share openly, when you have BPD and you go in and you have a cognitive collapse like this, where what you believe to be real and what is the truth are two different things. And so she'd alleged some things. The NYPD were looking for me. I was at my dad because I'd flown back I never want to miss my dad's birthday on the 1st of January. So I was back in South Africa. I get a text message from my landlord. I was living in the East Village. He says, "Orrin, someone from the NYPD was here looking for you." I'm like, whoa, what's this? And so you see a smile on my face now, but it was the craziest time. So this woman I loved so much had literally disappeared in front of my eyes, and it was just it was a crazy time. And then that following year in 2017, I did some of the deepest self work I've ever done. I went to Northern California. I went and did a program hosted by the Hoffman Institute, and just did some deep healing, deep growth, deep learning.
Well, thanks for sharing, man.
Incredible, Orrin. Brian, so, Côte d'Azur looks very idyllic from the outside, it's always, the sun is shining. You're part of pretty much a galactic rugby team at the time. You choose a position and there's a superstar in it. But we know, I've lived a little bit through French bureaucracy as well. It's not always plain sailing. Especially you packed up a family. Did you have your two boys already, or they were born over here? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Take us a little bit through the tough times outside what the TV didn't see.
Well, sometimes the TV did it because Murad was very outspoken, like many France rugby club owners. So I'll never forget from my first the actual first start, I actually got there. So I'd ended with the Stormers in July 2013 was my last game. And then obviously sort of my contract with Toulon had started on the 1st of July. But we still had Super Rugby until sort of mid-July. I then knew I was part of the Springbok setup, so I sort of gave myself like a 2-week window before actually getting to France. So myself and my wife went up to London. I did the filming with British Airways, where I raced the Airbus A380 as one of their campaigns. Like, oh, this is really cool. And then got to Toulon sort of last week of July. And I think that initial thing of Murad waiting for me at the airport with a host of cameras, and like really was like a Hollywood production. I'm like, I'm prepared to play rugby, but okay, I'll go with the flow. And then, like, again, took me to that same restaurant to go wine and dine, like photographers all around us, took me to the stadium, showing us off. And so the whole plan was that I'd go visit, but it was rugby championship. I was going to come back to South Africa and play. And then in that week, they were like, okay, listen, you got to open your bank account, you got to do X, Y, and Z. Bryan, I know you said you're only going to come here like this to be introduced, but would you mind playing our first warm-up game of the season? And I'm like, but that's not what we said, right? Like, and the agents are also sort of they pick the one and half a dozen of the other, so they need to appease both parties. And I'm like, well, this is not what the plan, but I mean, obviously now I can't back out because everyone's looking at me. So I didn't sort of play this game. I was actually very average, but I opened my bank account and I sort of get my salary end of July, and I've only been paid like for 4 days. And I'm like, I go to my agent and I'm like, okay, guys, what's happening here? My contract says the 1st of July. I sort of stopped my Thomas contract mid-July. So I'm now sort of 2 weeks out of pocket here because you're supposed to be playing me. They said, no, but the president says you only arrived on the 26th. I'm like, you didn't tell me that he was only going to pay me if I arrived on the 26th. My contractual obligations, the 1st of July. That was sort of like the first thing. Then I was like, oh my word, this is going to be very interesting. And then I was in Argentina like a couple of weeks later, and sort of my agent phoned me, said, listen, your club owner Murad is not going to pay you if you don't come back to play your first game for the club. I'm like, but I thought, like, contractually, we said I'm going to be playing for the Springbok for the Rugby Championship. He goes, well, you're going to have to pay your own flight back. Because South African Rugby weren't willing to fly me back to France because that was a commitment. So then I had to pay for my own flight back to Toulon to get there on the Tuesday. And now I'm obviously the marquee signing for the year, so there's a massive expectation. Get to training on the Tuesday, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm making my debut sort of mid-rugby championship. We actually had a really good rugby championship at that point. And I'm like, okay, ready to go. And Bernard Laporte picked me on the bench. And I'm like, I'm a marquee player. How the hell? So we played against Grenoble away from home. And I mean, when it doesn't go well in France, flip, as you know, you drive everywhere on a bus, right? Which I hadn't got used to. So it was like this 7-hour journey to Grenoble. And then came off the bench with like 7 minutes ago. Johnny Wilkinson missed a conversion of Matt Gitto's try to level. So my first game, I'd only played 8 minutes, and we ended up losing in Grenoble. And Grenoble was sort of like, they just got to the top 14 in the 2013-2014 season, and they'd beaten the Galacticos, and Bryan Habana, the Mocky player, had made his debut, and it was just like abysmal. And I was like, get me out of here. The Toulon team actually had to go back on the Sunday to go train. I was like, listen, I'm out of here. I'm going to Brisbane to go play for the Box. You're not going to see me in any way or form. So there was like all these things of just learning about a culture, firstly, where you can't understand the language, a culture that is extremely passionate in their verbalization of life, extremely, I want to say, eccentric or passionate about how they act. So they live very much in the moment. And I think as South Africans, we have a lot of resilience, but we don't really live in the moment because of how we get brought up. You get taught a little bit of critical thinking, you get taught a bit of visionary, but there it's like they're living in the moment the whole time. And in that initial year, that didn't go well. I only played 10 games in my first season. I got injured playing for the Box, and it was just like an absolute rolling of a sort of downward snowball that I couldn't fix, which was not ideal. But I think therein taught me, firstly, a lot about myself, how I needed to leverage, to Orrin's point around, you don't know how strong and capable you are. And only once the world really, pushes you to the limit, do you have to either reach out for support, get yourself a toolkit to improve yourself, have people in your corner that can criticize you to build you up, not criticize you to break you down. But there comes a real sense of self-critical development that you need to go through when times are tough. And in so doing, that you're constantly building resilience, but learning to live with a passionate people that are very much in the moment with massive expectations was very different to the extremely rigid, professional, systematic process that I've been in from a rugby context in South Africa.
Okay, so let's talk about the playbook for change. So, Orrin, you're in US, things are as low as it sounds like it's been for you, but you make a decision about what's next. What's going through your mind? What are you deciding? How do you fight back and make this work?
I think the one thing that I've been blessed with, and I think we've built into, it's built into how I think about my life, and it's been built into how we approach strategic planning in our business, is this idea of confronting the reality of where we are at right now. And, when I do my dream book each year, which is my top 10 personal goals and dreams, there's a bit of a process before you do your new dream book or your new top goals, like what's working, what's not working. You rate yourself, and there's almost like an internal / external analysis, and that's what precipitates what goes into your goals for the year ahead. And then in the business, it's a similar thing. We do a SWOT, and we look at a lot of internal metrics. And if I think to sort of some transformational time in my business journey, where it was probably one of the scariest and lowest times in our business, which I think precipitated this unbelievable growth that we've experienced over the last 5 years. So in 2019, we were going into the strategic planning. Our two biggest customers we knew we were going to lose. We had a support contract with FNB, and we had a support contract with Liquid Telecom. So FNB had made a strategic decision that they were all outsourced partners. We're going to be we're going to be moved in-house, so we're going to lose that work. And Liquid Telecoms were doing a global outsource, and we were going to lose that work too, because we didn't have representation in those regions. And when I really analyzed our organic growth, Justinas, it was quite clear that our organic growth was not coming from new logos. There were some new logos, but the majority of it was coming from the growth of existing customers. And then on the horizon, coming late 2019, early 2020, we started hearing about this thing, COVID. So what did we do? In 2020, we did the most aggressive cost cutting we've ever done, bar nothing. We had still almost 4 years on our lease in Manhattan, hardcore Israeli landlord who was not hearing any negotiation whatsoever. And one day we just moved out, and we told him so we got very aggressive in turn. We did 3 rounds of retrenchments, which for anybody that's run a business, like you get to know your people so deeply, and so like that, it's like family. And so we did 3 rounds of retrenchments. And the retrenchment process in South Africa is rough because you have to give notice, and people don't know if it's going to be them or not. And so anyway, long story short, we cut an unbelievable amount of costs. We did the most aggressive cost cutting we've ever done, bar nothing. We took 50% of those savings and put it back into cash flows and profits to just protect the business. And then we took 50% and we put it into what we call the growth and innovation provision. So we almost expensed it, but we provided for it. So as it built up. And we were able to do some radically different things. We retained a buy-side advisory firm to really lean into acquisitive growth. We went and did a deep rethink about what was our core offering and what we believe was becoming commoditized. And there were just so many companies that, so we came up with what is today called Innovate, which is our AI automation, digital transformation managed service. And we literally reinvented the business. And it didn't happen overnight. And to be honest, our Innovate offering has only succeeded over the last 18 to 24 months, although we started working on it in 2020. But it was, I think, just confronting the reality. And then it was the most amazing burning platform. Guys, we're losing our 2 biggest customers. There is what the fuck is a pandemic? Well, it's coming, okay? And suddenly now everybody's ready to make decisions. You didn't have to hold big debates. We're being decisive. We're doing it now. And, over the years in the 2001, 2002 cross, 2008, 2009, we've built a muscle that if the shit's hitting the fan, we move very quickly and very decisively. And fortunately, that's what we did. And I think it started this trajectory that we're still continuing on to this day.
It sounds so structured, but I believe we're in that tornado.
Oh, it was a mess.
Yeah.
It was a total mess, and I was hoping nobody would figure out that I'm not 100% sure what I'm doing.
But I like the fact that the dream book aspect that you put in. So it's while you're in it, it's a tornado, it's a mess, but you can structure it afterwards and learn from it. Bryan, so you eventually start playing for Toulon. You win everything and everyone. It's an unbeatable team. All the trophies you can collect. Then 2018, you decide to pull the plug. You still had some kilometers left in your legs, I believe. How did that come? And then on top of that, moved back to South Africa. Take us through that decision.
I think one of the biggest fallacies that professional athletes hate to believe is that the end is always near. I think sometimes you unfortunately don't get to decide when that end is. And that 2017, 2018 year was as low a point in my rugby career as what I'd ever experienced. And through all the highs, through all the lows, you always think that it's impossible that the end is inevitable. Because it's just when you've been so consumed in this thing for so long. And I'll never forget, I sort of had a game on the 27th of April, 2017. And I'd gone walking with a dog the day before in France. And it was on the Thursday before the game on Saturday, and we had the captain's run on the Friday. And as I was walking down the one hill, I sort of felt something go in my knee. And I was like, this is interesting. So got to captain's the next day. My knee was freaking inflamed. And I was like, ooh, this is not ideal. I'm like, Doc, I think you're going to need to inject me with something that can take away the pain because I literally can't walk on my legs. He's like, don't worry, we'll inject you. So got injected the Saturday of the game, and again, reflection actually allows for some real brutal honesty. And also my mind within, I'd given Toulon a lot, but I'm like, Toulon is Toulon, so I'm making no decisions. I scored a try, just before half time, sort of 95-meter intercept try, no one from Cup could catch me. Came off at half time. I was like, oh no, I'll go for a bit longer. And then I actually looked at Drew Mitchell just after half time, and I said, like, no, Drew, I'm substituting myself. And Drew's like, you can't do that. I'm like, no, Drew, you come on, I go off. Not knowing that was going to be the last time I ever got to be on a rugby field. And could I probably still gone a little bit flip, potentially? At that moment, it was probably the drugs, keeping me together, given how sore my knee was. And then went for a scan the next week, and they go like, well, look, there's a little bit more to what you think here. You've got no meniscus left. I'm like, sorry, what? Like, no, you got bone-on-bone bruising. I'm like, ooh, that's not what I envisioned when I substituted myself. So not realizing that me substituting myself coming up the field after having just had the glory of scoring a try at Stade Mayol, on reflection, was probably one of the worst decisions I'd ever made, because it was literally the last time I got to be on a rugby field. And then went through a process over the next year where I really tried. I tried my utmost best to get back. And unfortunately, the inevitable was not only facing me in the face, the inevitable had already come and gone. And you talked about sort of milestones. I mentioned the 24th of June, the 20th of November 2004. But I think one of the lowest points was the 24th of March 2018, when I actually had to make my announcement. And obviously, given social media, the rise of everything, you've now got to do this lovely post and thank everyone, and you've got to try to be unique and doing it. I'm like, oh man. And I'll never forget sort of doing that post the morning and going to the club, and obviously, you get these thousands of messages, and people only remember the good times and the praises and everything. And I got home, and my wife was pregnant with our second, and our 3-year-old was sort of in the house. And I'll never forget opening the door in Toulon and just breaking, like the tears just flowed out of me, because it was almost this metaphor of the door was closed, as the door is closed, and I just bawled on the top of the staircase at home, thinking, I'm never gonna get it back. I'm never gonna have that opportunity to do something you love, to do something that's given you so much. 80,000 people sing the national anthem. It's all gone, right? And there was like all this meteoric dumping of it's done. And as I opened the door at the top of the staircase, bawling my eyes out, I'll never forget hearing my 3-year-old have this incredible belly laugh with my wife, who was now pregnant with our second, and realizing, as low as that point was for me as an individual, there was more that I needed to live for, because there were people that I'm now responsible for, like literally people that I was responsible for. And my 3-year-old had no idea who I was in terms of a rugby player. He just knew me as his dad. My wife had sacrificed so much for me to live out my dream, and she was more than just support. She was the most amazing thing that had ever happened to me. And I sort of had to reflect on, and I think that's probably where a lot of athletes struggle, Flip, is that I think for most of us, when you're going through your career and you're so consumed in this unrealistic reality that you're living in, earning a salary of a CEO at 21 years old, traveling the world, flying business class, doing all the cool things. The one thing you unfortunately get lulled into a sense of is thinking that your identity is that sport. And I think what I was very fortunate of in the sort of surroundings that we had, whether it be PSP giving us, Bible studies every week, or, John Smith allowing me to interact with the world. I think what I really benefited from around the people I sort of stayed close to while playing rugby was that, as much as I realized that rugby was a big part of my identity, rugby was never my identity. And you don't always get it right. And there are times where you sort of struggle, or I say, in my day or in my day, I would have done things very differently. um, but I was so grateful that there were elements of my rugby journey that allowed me to appreciate how much rugby was a part of my reality, but also that rugby wasn't my identity. And I think that sort of really allowed me sort of to transition. And, Orrin spoke about sometimes you need to reinvent yourself. Sometimes you need to look outside what you know. And it's sort of cool that, Orrin and, one of his partners comes from Ra. My current co-founder at Payme Now was my university roommate at Bastion Manscosa. We've known each other for a quarter of a century. He was MC at my wedding. And Gary plays whole saying of, the harder you work, the luckier you get. I think there's sort of a piece missing there. None of us choose our own luck. And I think for me, I sort of look at the totality of successful people. There's sort of 5 key elements. You need to be disciplined. You need to be willing to sacrifice. You need to be willing to work hard. And then you need to be resilient and perseverant. Because nothing comes easy. So if you don't have those 5 key elements, whether you're a professional athlete, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a musician, whether you're an actor, whether you're a politician, chances of you being successful are not really going to be there. Flip, you get asked quite a bit, like, who's the best coach you played under? And best is very subjective. I tell everyone the best coach is the one that selected me. I gave myself every opportunity to be selected, but I never selected myself. Very much like with Payme Now, I never selected myself. Dion selected our co-founding group, right? And it was because of our relationship, because of opportunity that he saw, but it was because I was also having those 5 elements of transferable skill sets that he sort of looked at and adequately believed could play its part in his business. So did I have to learn very quickly that MVP in business does not mean most valuable player. It means something very different in the tech space. 100%. I'll never forget. I was in Japan 2019, watching the final of the Rugby World Cup, and Dion had got sort of the 4 of us together, myself, Dion, Paddy Potgieter, and Willem van Zyl, who's our CDO and our CTO respectively. And I'm like in now celebrating, and Dion's like, "Yo, dude, you're not gonna believe this. Paddy's just got our MVP." I'm like sitting like, how many thousand kilometers away, and I'm like, "You absolute twist. I thought I was the MVP." And like there was silence on the other end of the line. And he's like, "Huh? What do you mean, dude?" I'm like, "Dude, I thought like the 4 of us, I'm the most valuable player, right? That's a line you threw me. I'm gonna start playing me now." He goes, "Yeah, MVP in your world, I understand, but minimum viable product, we've just processed a transaction in less than 7 minutes. You're good, but you're not that good." But yeah, I think that ability flip to have those 5 skill sets, and one of my biggest learnings in this transition period, and it's actually not a transition anymore. I'm in the next chapter, right? The transition period happens for a year or 2. You can't say you're in the transition period because at a point you need to transition. And I very much believe I'm not in that transition period. But one of the biggest skill sets that I've learned taking from rugby to the corporate space is that you need to unlearn to be able to learn. Because the way the world is working at the minute, the way rugby used to work when we played, it's very different. And if you are so pragmatically against unlearning, you don't give yourself the opportunity to become better. And I think it's in unlearning that the most powerful elements of learning do happen. And I'm very fortunate that I've had points had to sort of openly admit that I'm not good enough. At points I've had to admit that I don't know as much as my fellow co-founders. At points that I needed to learn how things work in a world that they'd been in for 20 years. But if I wasn't willing to unlearn, I think the ability to then transition into this new chapter would have been very difficult.
Yeah, amazing, Bryan. And thanks for sharing it. It's stuff I didn't even know, and we all go through that. I've got a red eye because I've got a 7-month-old that didn't sleep last night, so that's as you said, we need the reasons to wake up and work. So it's very much relating to that. Thanks.
So, Orrin, what was the transformation for you when your first child was born? Was that quite a pivotal moment for you as well?
Yeah, for sure. I always wanted to be a dad, and when I fell in love with Liesel, and you never know, like, is your person going to be a great mom? But I think the big transformational moment that happened for me was I'd always been this martyr entrepreneur. NetSurIT always came first. And like, if we had an extra 50,000 Rand to spend a month in the next year's budget, it would never be like, okay, can I pay myself more? It was more a case of, let's put it into marketing, or let's put it into this. And, but something shifted that night when our little Lulu was born. And I could feel a change in me where, and I think, Bryan, the way you said it just resonated so deeply. It wasn't just about me anymore. And I have this greater responsibility, and I need to be more balanced in how I think about what I need and want in my life and what the business needs. And you would think that would result in some level of slower growth. Lulu was born on the 12th of January 2020. So I kind of spoke a little bit earlier around the year of 2020, what that was like. But it just brought a decisiveness and a balance in the way I thought that really had a huge impact. And I think the other thing for me is that it connected me to, I lost my mom in 2016, but my dad was definitely still alive. And I kind of appreciated more what my parents had gone through for me, and had a deeper understanding and gratitude for that. And I really believe, Justinus, it made me a better leader, and it made me even more decisive, and just balancing my own needs more effectively with what the business needed actually resulted in the business growing even faster.
So we've come full circle, and what I'd like to ask both of you is just, so where are you now? What's the legacy? What do you see as the future for the next 10 or 20 years? What is it you're working towards now? Maybe Bryan, you can go first.
20 years, Justinus. I'm working one day at a time here, dude. It's a very philosophical 20 years. No, I think for me at the minute is obviously a lot of unlearning that I think probably needing to go through still. I think as we grow a business, and when you're involved in a startup, and we were 4 guys that started the business in 2019. We're now over 60 full-time staff, processing about 1 million transactions a month. We got shareholders to keep happy. We're live in 4 territories globally. So it's really intense. We're in an environment where 6 years ago, no one really knew what our ecosystem was. Now, what was 6 years ago is now no longer good enough. And it's about sort of inventing what you want to do, pivoting in understanding trends, market considerations, and AI is playing a considerable role in the change of how people are interacting. I think in the space we play in, and we all play in, privacy and personal information is on top of everyone's mind, and you're really needing to guard your business for longevity. If you gave me a big valuation now for Payment Now, would I sell my shareholding in it, the very minimal shareholding? I don't think so, purely because what we're doing is making a massive impact. And I've been very fortunate within the Payment Now environment of really becoming involved in something that the purpose is far beyond better than what we did as a rugby player. And the highs and the lows of professional rugby is great, but when you go into a bathroom and you see a Payment Now user and you say to them, "Oh, you know about Payment Now," and the first word that comes out of their mouth is "thank you," and you're like, "Thank you for what?" Or like, you have to clean the urinal. Like not even my family wanted to help me. And I think the purpose-driven environment in which we now function as a company, I think our first month, Orrin, I know your daughter was born in January. We went live with our first client in March 2020, 2 days before our first family meeting, 7 days before hard lockdown. It was brutal. Four guys that funded a business with not a lot of money, didn't have any. We're getting traction with our angel investor, but hadn't had any. We hadn't unlocked the first tranche of capital, and we like to friends and family, anyone, everywhere. And our first month in March 2020, we did 61 transactions on our platform. With a staff complement of less than 80. And like, okay, well, 60, so not everyone's on the platform, only doing 2 transactions for those that are. Guys, we're going to need to scale this very quickly. But I think, having seen that journey, having seen the growth, where we currently are, I think we're now looking at how do we continuously grow. There's a certain ceiling when it comes to the formal employed market in South Africa. So how do we get an SME model going? Is there a potential direct B2C model or removing the risk? So where Frame now currently is, I think there's, to Orrin's point, one needs to look. I'm gonna disagree with Orrin. I think if you want to be successful in life, balance is an unattainable objective. I think there is a certain work-life harmony that you need to gravitate towards, because being balanced is equilibrium, and you unfortunately can't have equilibrium, when it comes to wanting to be successful, because you have 3 silos in your life and you give each silo balance. That's equilibrium. So you're either not giving a silo 66.66666% pairing, or you're just being average. So there's the sense of gravitating towards balance where elements of a silo can contribute to your success. And I think for us, there's a small window of opportunity now to really continue accelerating family now growth, improving our product offering, being able to listen, to understand rather than listen to reply. And my wife Janine's been asking that for the last 20 years. I'm not quite there yet, but I will get there eventually one day. But I think we've got this phenomenal opportunity to grow a business. I think the very loose terms of growing a unicorn, or everyone's success outlook on life is different. And to Orrin's point around creating this framework of what you want to achieve, how are you reflecting on where you have been? How are you reflecting on where you currently are? And what are you doing to plan for where you want to be? And I don't think you can have this 10-year plan. Yet you can have a long-term goal to which you want to get to. What is the action plan to lead to that goal? But I think a lot of people overlook the nano environments of the action plan needed to get to short, medium, and long-term goals. And sort of love what Orrin does in saying that New Year's resolutions are absolute BS, right? Because a lot of times New Year's resolutions say they die down on the 14th or 15th of January because they don't have an action plan. But when you become self-reflective of where you are, and that's not just in business, I'll be the first one to say I'm sometimes not the best dad. I had a situation last night where I'd lost my temper, no corporal punishment, but I broke emotionally when my wife showed me what my 11-year-old had thought about himself because of how I'd acted. And there's those elements of, as a parent, you need to unlearn, because like all of us, there was corporal punishment. You were beaten as a kid, so how do you unlearn only the stuff because of how you got brought up? And I'll be the first to say, I'm not always the best husband. First to say I'm not always the best dad. And I think so there lies a really important stepping stone of acknowledgement. But then comes the accountability of constant self-reflection and self-assessment. And the thing is, I'd love to say to you, Preminar is going to be a dollar unicorn in 5 years' time, and I'm going to retire and never work again. I would not know what to do with and I would be the biggest irritation to my wife if I retired anytime soon. The biggest. My children, I would literally get kicked out of the house and go talk to someone else. So I think the drive to continually searching, and Orrin talked about, how do you look at acquisitions? How do you look at getting better? How do you look at growing, your portfolio. And I think I've only been involved in Pay Me Now as a business that's been successful, but I've been involved in one or two that were very unsuccessful that I don't talk about and don't start. So I think it really is the critical self-assessment with the right fundamental intellect around you, because I don't know everything. But I need to maybe have someone in my stable from which I can learn, for which I can grow, and in so doing, reflect. So to be honest, I'm literally, and I sort of joked about, one day at a time, because every day is different. The world is changing at such a rapid pace. Faster than it's ever changed before. There's jobs being created now that if you had told the four of us in 1995 that these jobs were going to be around, we would be laughing in your face. 100%. So I think for me, it is the daily self-assessment and self-reflection. I'd obviously love to be a part of Pay Me Now's continual growth, moving into one or two other territories. We're now currently live in four geographies globally, becoming very market specific. Do you grow into becoming a digital bank or neobank? But I think sometimes what you do miss is also living in the now, and sort of celebrating those small wins. But I think the constant thing of, first and foremost, how do I be a better person? How do I be a better husband? How do I be a better father? How do I be better at business? And sort of adding those elements around continual growth. Flip will know Heineke Meyer was very strong on the Kaizen principle, the continual growth of where life is. And the story that Heineke would tell around, again, if you believe it's going to rain, but you don't take your umbrella, are you really believing? And I think for me, it's understanding the now. Yes, look forward to the future. But I think we sometimes live in a world where we don't appreciate the now, and that becomes a massive stumbling block for the future.
Wow. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, that was
Orrin.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Bryan, I looked at Pay Me Now, and you guys, like, I didn't even know, to be honest, that there was a service that did that. And so whoever in your team, if they can please follow up with me, I'd love to see if, we can use you guys in our business, because that comes up all the time, where we have a needy staff member that asks. We have a whole structured process around this, and it's admin heavy. And, and I think really what a gift for any of us that have a career or a work that has such a deep and meaningful purpose. When you look at the parts of the brain, and particularly the reptilian brain, and the core of what drives us as humans, and what we connect to from a purpose and an emotion perspective, it's when there is a real why. And I look at, I was watching, I have this love-hate relationship with social media, where I'm sometimes on it, then I uninstall it. And I was watching this thing on Instagram, and there was this woman who'd, she was a leader of a business in New York. She went for a medical. They told her she has 2 years to live. She had some type of brain cancer. And she just thought to herself, well, what I want to do with this next 2 years, I want to do something where I'm really going to have an impact on people's lives, like really, really have an impact on people's lives. And, it makes me think, Bryan, walking into a bathroom and someone seeing Pay Me Now and thanking him. Like, I can tell you now, with our Dreams program in NetSurIT, where we have this process each year where you are encouraged to come up with your top 10 personal. I have people sometimes leave, and 5 years later I get a WhatsApp or a message saying, Orrin, I did this, it was in my dream book. And I'm not saying everybody, I get it all the time, but it carries so much meaning and purpose for me. So from a legacy perspective, we do want to bring on an investment partner next year. And, obviously in that situation, there could come a point where they decide I'm not the right person to lead the business on this next trajectory. I hope they do. But this purpose we have in NetSurIT, supporting the dreams of the doers, just carries huge meaning. I have the full quote of it tattooed on my arm from here down here, and so it carries so much meaning. And so that's part of legacy. I think being active and present in Lulu and Eva's lives is a huge gift. So I definitely feel the time I spend with them will have an impact on who they become. And then, Bryan, I listened to your story of moving to France, and I convinced Liesel to move to Atlanta last year when she was 5 months pregnant. And it's a story for another time. But the sacrifices she has made for me, part of my legacy is that I just get the chance to have as big an impact on her life as she's had on my entrepreneurial journey. And then, maybe just to conclude, Justinas, we did a retreat in Houston with a guy called John Drury. Justinas and I are part of a similar entrepreneurial organization, so there were 8 of us, and we had to talk about legacy, and everybody prepared it. And one of the guys in my forum, his name is Victor Chu, he spoke of this idea that legacy opportunities occur in so many moments in the day. So you meet someone, and the way you treat them, how kind you are to them, how you might recognize them, the compassion you show, the empathy you show. So you almost think like, is a daily moment a legacy opportunity? And I came away from that thinking that's so powerful, because he spoke of a moment he had with his uncle in his childhood that has had the hugest impact on his life. And so I really love that idea that we have legacy opportunities in every single day in our lives, and I definitely try and live that.
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing. Just before we wrap up, Bryan, Orrin, we have a little tradition on the show where we let our guests ask each other a question.
Okay.
So you can choose who goes first.
I do for beauty.
Age for beauty. Okay, no, I'll take it. It's probably a longer question and a longer discussion, but I would love to learn from your experience. This is Ringo, guys. I didn't know he'd be showing up. Your experience where you had to tell your wife you're moving to France, and if there is any sort of thing you experience or learning you could share in that I've experienced, but I would love to learn from, what learnings did you take from that in just protecting the sanctity of your relationship, which is really, my view, is the foundation on which our children grow up.
Yeah, great question, Orrin. And I'm not gonna lie to you, it was an extremely difficult discussion because, in a way, I felt a bit like a liar, because I literally promised her one thing, and I needed to make comfort with the fact that what I'd promised I wasn't able to live up to. And so the instance in my life, with my relationship with my dad that had become strained, financially, things we started finding out. And I really, up until that point, in my opinion, my wife was given everything I could give her, and I was able to support her fully. She started her own gym. Like, we had the perfect, white picket fence house, living in, it was just everything. And I just came in, I turned that world upside down. But in that moment, I also understood that as much as he had sacrificed for me to be able to continue living out my dream, I needed to realize that I am also going to need to sacrifice certain elements of things that I maybe wasn't willing to. One of the conditions was we'd had 2 dogs. And I said, well, you promised me, so the dogs are going with. And I'm like, do you know how much it costs to take 2 chow chow dogs to France? Do you even understand? Because listen, I hear you, but you're going to be buggering off in France. I'm going to be all alone. You told me Cape Town, but this is my space. This is exactly how I know to function. I know where everything is. I can speak the language. I've got support networks. You're now removing me. So there were certain elements of me needing to humble myself to accept that I need to be as much a part of her continual sacrifice for me to live out my dream as what it is for her. And, that was not an overflowing of more showing of love. It was really being able to cognitively appreciate and make a stark decision that you need to understand the level of sacrifice. Because I think when you are the provider, when you are trying to contribute and give your family, your wife, the most incredible life, and sometimes we just can't think our contribution is all that matters. We sometimes forget to appreciate, and I think in that moment, I really needed to realize and appreciate how big that sacrifice was, because we talk about sacrifice that they make, but we don't actually understand how massive it is. And I think for me, Orrin, it really was understanding how big that sacrifice was, because if you then understand how big that sacrifice was, your level of appreciating, level of respecting, and level of giving would match. And I think sometimes the levels don't match because you don't appreciate the level of sacrifice. And I think for me, it really was getting to the point of she gave up all her dreams. And I think if I think of how my life panned out, if, 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 if I had someone that was a dream killer in my life constantly every day, I would never become a Springbok rugby player that played. Yes, there would an element of dream killers along the journey, but literally, my wife had to give up all her dreams so that I could continue living out mine. And I think as soon as you start realizing how massive that sacrifice is, and almost put yourself in that role of, would you have sacrificed that much? It could potentially correlate, to the converse of how much you're then willing to go above and beyond to show appreciation, to show love, and, make sure that the sacrifice that they give you is reciprocated in the amount of love, care, understanding, and compassion. And I think that's the one thing from a rugby perspective that you don't learn, right? You don't learn about empathy or compassion because you don't give a rat's ass about your body, because you can't think emotionally about the impact your body might have because you're going to get killed by an All Black or by a Flip Panamava running in your channel. So, my dad never taught me compassion. I never got taught. So there's these things of how do you show appreciation for the sacrifice if you're not equipped to learn it? And I'm still learning. Again, I'll be the first to acknowledge that I've faltered many a time. My wife is by far, and I don't even have to say this in any hesitation, my wife is by far the best thing that's ever happened to me. And it's not just giving birth to my boys. She literally is. The rugby was great, but my wife is by far the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I need to understand her sacrifice to be able to appreciate it even more. So stumble quite a bit. So I'm hoping that long-winded answer gave you a bit of insight into it. Wasn't easy because I had to break a promise. And I think we all know men love to stick to their word. So yeah, but understanding the sacrifice, made me realize the appreciation.
That was very powerful. Thank you so much, Bryan. I really appreciate that.
I mean, we've had a lot of intense things going on our side. So my question is going to be very simple. Did you ever sign in the clock? Did you sign your autograph in the clock tower at King Edward?
No, I didn't.
As a border, as a border, that is just ridiculous. I cannot believe you've let me down. I built such an incredible respect for you, Mr. Klopper, and now it's dissipated.
That's such a brilliant question.
Sorry, Justina Script. Sorry, Justina Script. Maybe just at Cares, we had a clock tower, and there was a tradition in the matric year that you actually, if you didn't sign in the clock tower, you left Cares as a bit of a muku. I know we can't use that word in today's term. So it was this massive, you had to go, and I know there's a lot of traditions in and around Stellenbosch and whatever, but if you didn't sign your name in the clock tower at King Edward in your matric year, you were an absolute muku. So I'm very happy that the two of us on this call are mukus, because I also didn't. Because you have to sort of plan and wheel a deal. But the boarders had it a lot easier because they were literally at the school the whole time. Us day boys, we didn't have that opportunity.
That's awesome. Thanks, guys. That's amazing. So that's it for this episode of Winning the Away Game. We've got 11 other episodes in this first season, so make sure you find us on YouTube or wherever you go for your high-quality podcast. And please connect with us on LinkedIn or Instagram and let us know what you think of the show. If there's a specific guest you'd like to see on the show, we'd like to hear it and try our best to get them on the show. The show is recorded and produced by Jonathan from Ping Productions, brought to you in collaboration with the Lekker Network that's helping South Africans around the world share knowledge, network and gees. I'm Justinus Andriaanse.
And I'm Flip van der Merwe. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one, Winning the Away Game.